So the British effects of the war, and whenever I talk about war, I'm talking about the French and Indian War, or as they call it in Europe, the 7 Years' War. Okay, so first and foremost, there's 140 million pounds of debts. Now, in today's money, you're looking at probably somewhere around a $500 million. And a lot of that is from defending the colonies. And you have to remember that the person that started all this fighting was none other than George Washington. And George Washington's little skirmish that he had with the French exploded into a war for North America and also exploded into a war in Europe. So this went everywhere. And as a result of, the colonists starting this war, uh, Britain needed them to help pay for part of this. Okay. Now, I know we talk a lot in here about no taxation without representation. We talk about how unfair it was for all the taxes the colonists were paying. But the truth is that they were paying almost nothing compared to the British. They were paying 26 shillings a year in England, and over here they were paying one. So I don't know how outrageous that sounds to you, but it doesn't sound outrageous to me. Again, I'm sorry if any of you are like, "Oh no, you're a horrible person," which I am. I'm not saying I'm not, but you know, was the war justified? That's going to be a question that we need to ask, ourselves as we're learning about this. Before you were taught all these things about all these heroes, and they are heroes. They fought, they gave their lives, but at the same point, did they have to? Did they start a war that didn't need to be started? Okay, so the English colonies, William and Mary implemented what was called the writs of assistance. Okay, this is where they could basically do search and seizure without any type of evidence, no type of search warrant. Okay, if you did anything wrong, you were tried in an admiralty court. Okay, this means that you were shipped to Nova Scotia and you served. Well, you had no jury. You had a judge hear everything, and they could sometimes hold you. Well, they could hold you without any period of time. So you could be held maybe for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, and you might not even know what you're being held for. William and Mary also started to enforce the Navigation Acts. Okay, and they combined Massachusetts and Plymouth into one colony. Of course, it's kind of like adding Dallas and Fort Worth together. It's a little bit bigger than that. By the way, that's my personal shot at Massachusetts for the day. Okay. George the First and George the Second. Now, William and Mary had a daughter named Anne. Anne was barren, and so there was no heir to the throne. So they went to the closest relatives, which were in Germany. They were the Hanovers. You have George the First on the left-hand side over there. It looks like he's holding a little orb. And to the right of him was George the Second, whose cloak opened to show that he had really tiny legs. So either he had tiny little legs, which I've never read in history, or that's just not a great portrait. I hope he had tiny little baby legs. Okay? For anyone who knows who Baby Legs is, this makes me smile. Anyway, so I'm sorry, during the reigns of George the First and George the Second, though, they were not paying attention to what was going on in the colonies. This is what's called salutary neglect. By just focusing on what they needed to in England, learning English, worrying about all of your neighbors getting into a war with you, uh, they weren't doing what they needed to keep peace in the colonies. Okay, so Pontiac's Rebellion. So if you look at the end of the French and Indian War, one of the things that they were forced to give up was the Ohio Territory, and that is today Ohio, Oklahoma, Illinois, Michigan, and Wisconsin. All those territories were given up, and everything between the 13 colonies, so the Appalachian Mountains and the Mississippi River. So all of those things were given to the British. And ultimately, when the Americans win their independence, they also get those lands. So the Ottawa Indians were under a chief by the name of Pontiac. Pontiac did not like losing all the territory that he did, so he decided to go ahead and start attacking some of the forts and colonies out in the Ohio Territory. So he's going out attacking, making runs on different areas, and he even goes into Fort Detroit, and he kills 2,000 settlers. Okay, or today what they call in Detroit a slow Tuesday. Shot at Detroit. Boom. Okay. So anyway, the British thought that they would try and pretend to make peace when really, you know, giving them death by giving them blankets infected with smallpox. Okay. So a lot of the Ottawa will die as a result of this. This is a this is easily a what biological warfare looks like, and this is really an attempt at genocide of the Ottawa Indians. So, as a result of Pontiac's Rebellion, the British already they didn't have all the money they needed to protect all the colonies, so they thought one of the easiest things you can do is just ban everyone from crossing the Appalachian Mountains. Okay, so they created what was called the Royal Proclamation Line of 1763. If you don't go into their territory, maybe they won't mess with us, or we can wait until we get our money back so we can go in and wipe them out. I'm sure that there was something evil in the plan somewhere, but I'm just not sure what it was at this time. But, you know, this is right after the blankets, and so everyone was supposed to stay on that side of the border. Okay? Uh, anyway, if you're mindlessly copying everything down on the slide, well, cheerio. Daniel Boone, he was one of the people that migrated to Kentucky with other Americans. Uh, they thought that they had earned this land with blood. Many people had fought battles in this area and died or lost family members, and so they thought it was their natural right to go ahead and keep it. Uh, Daniel Boone's a kind of odd cat. In addition to fighting in both the American Revolution and the 7 Years' War, he also liked to go hunting. He went on a hunting trip one time for a total of 19 months. In that time, his wife declared him dead, and as was a custom at the time, she married his brother. Okay, remember, there's not a lot of people that live out there, so there's not a lot of choices. And generally, whenever you have someone die, you want someone who will take care of the kids. And what better choice than Uncle Daddy, Daniel Boone's brother? Then he comes back. She's pregnant, like 7 months pregnant, and Daniel Boone knows he's been gone for a while. So there's this awkward moment where he's talking to his wife and his brother, like, "Hey, I'm finally back. How's everything going? And how long have you been pregnant?" And then it got even more awkward. So George Grenville, okay, that's a cat pictured to the left there. George Grenville was the prime minister who tried to control spending. Uh, Okay, that's kind of weird because I know that we're in a country where our political leaders pretend like they're going to do something, but in the end, they do absolutely nothing. Okay, he started enforcing navigation acts. Now, one of the key things behind the navigation acts is if everything's being shipped on British ships, then they'd know exactly what you have and it'd be easier to tax you. Okay, and Grenville also started taxing the colonies. So they created for something first called the Revenue Act that the colonists called the Sugar Act. And this lowered the tax for raw sugar, molasses, a couple other sweet things, and then some things that obviously aren't sugar, which are like textiles or clothes, wine, coffee, and indigo, which is a dye. Uh, Now, the colonists were not having to pay as much as they did in England, and to send out the enforcers and the military to get it, it cost 4 times what it brought in. So for every dollar they collected in taxes, it cost them $4 to get it. So not very cost efficient. Okay. Eventually, this will be repealed. The Quartering Act. This forced the colonists to provide homes for British troops. Okay, either their own or build ones. Basically, this was just putting British troops in empty buildings. But the colonists didn't like having to do this, and in reality, as horrible as this may sound, they were there to protect them from the Native Americans. Okay, and by the way, I know that you're probably thinking, well, the only reason the Native Americans were upset or wanting to invade them was because of all the murdering of Native Americans, stealing of their land, breaking promises. I'm not saying that's not the case. Okay, it clearly is the case. They were all in the wrong. Okay, but the British troops were there to protect them, and were like, you know what? I know you're here to protect us, but you need to find your own place to live. Anyway, so the Stamp Act. This is the first direct tax on the colonies. This is for all printed materials, legal documents. This is newspapers, wedding certificates, birth certificates, death certificates, wills. So this really affects most the wealthy people, but also remember these are some extreme religious fanatics who they're not going to get married without having a legal certificate to do it. Okay? Now, in Britain, they're paying taxes on this already, and they're paying twice as much as the colonies are. Okay? But the colonists are crying, no taxation without representation. Or maybe they were shouting it. I don't know. I put cries of no taxation without representation, but I think you kind of get the idea. They were not happy. Okay? So the Stamp Act Congress, this is the first time the colonists all worked together. Now, this is important because if this fails, it would be hard to get everyone to work together again. Okay? You ever work in a group with partners and you go in and, it's you, Doug, Phyllis, and Steve, and Doug, Phyllis, and Steve don't do anything. You have to do all the work, and all they have to do is be there on the day of the presentation. None of them show up, so you end up with a 60 because of Doug, Phyllis, and Steve, and so you're never going to work with them again. Anyway, so this was a petition to the king to repeal the Stamp Act, and the way that they were going to fight it was by boycotting British goods. Okay, you don't buy any British goods at all, and that's how we'll pay for everything. Okay, or that's how we'll wreck the British economy and make them think twice about taxing us. Okay. By the way, the word boycott actually comes from Switzerland in the 1300s. Whenever an orphan boy, would do something wrong, as a consequence, they would take away his bed. Hence the term boycott. By that was a lie. That was a lie. What I just said. I don't know where the word boycott came from, but anyway, it sounded believable, didn't it? Okay. Anyway, so eventually they'll repeal the Stamp Act. The colonists are so happy that they build a statue of King George III. And at the same time that happens, Parliament passes what's called the Declaratory Act, and this lets Parliament pass binding laws in all cases. Okay, so you may have won this round, but now you'll have to do everything we say. And it's the law, so you'll have to do it. Okay, so the concept of the British was that, uh, the whole taxation without representation is that the colonists had what was called virtual representation. And Parliament represented all subjects of the British Empire, not just the people that lived on the islands of Great Britain. Okay, so they represented everyone from Australia to India to Africa to Asia and even in the Americas. So they were all represented, but the colonists didn't like that because they wanted particular people to represent their personal interest. Now, one of the problems with dealing with the British government is the fact that the Constitution is not a single document. Okay? It's a combination of laws that are created by the Parliament, King, and the court system. Okay? And the court system helped establish English law. So all of these things together, there's some laws that actually will go against the others and make it a little bit inconsistent. Okay? Uh, Also, during this time, the British passed what was called the Currency Act of 1764, and they said that you couldn't print your own currency, that you could only use British currency. And the colonists were printing their own currency. Sometimes it was from town to town. Sometimes it was a store might have their own currency, and it was only tradable in those places. So Parliament banned all printing of paper money, and this causes a recession. And think about this: if you got rid of all money, and that would be credit and paper, we'd have to go back to the barter system, which is where we are on. Okay, and then you're going to school, and you're hoping that the gas station needs half a chicken that you can trade them for enough gas to fill up your car. Or like I want a quarter of that goat. It's like, dang it. It's like, well, I'm not ready to break up this goat yet. It's kind of like when you have $100 bill and you're like, no, I don't want to spend this. I don't want to go and buy something for $5 and lose it. Yeah, it's kind of that way whenever you're carrying around a goat that you need to trade. You don't want to break up the goat like as soon as you get it because it's pretty messy. Sorry for all the goat related statements. So Charles Townsend, he takes over as the Prime Minister of England. Okay, he was a great speaker even when drunk. In fact, whenever he passes the biggest bill of his career, the Townsend Act, uh, they couldn't find him the morning of, and they found out that he had been out drinking all night. Could not stand up. So, they had an hour before they had to be in Congress, and they find him, they prop him up. He gives an amazing speech, and about 2 days later, he, you know, basically starts to go into a coma and die from alcohol poisoning. Okay. Uh, but the Townsend Act, one of the things it does is it closes the Massachusetts legislature. You have to understand that most of the troublemakers in the American Revolution are from the city of Boston. This is a city of traitors, Traders, not traitors, although they would say that also traitors. Okay? So like a double traitor city, traitor city. Anyway, so they passed a new tax called the Revenue Act, and this creates new taxes on glass, lead, and paper. And they also really start pushing the writs of assistance. And this is where officials could seize property without due process. Now, if they're doing this for the safety of people, sometimes people will accept it, but it only takes one corrupt person to make everyone look bad. Okay, and what happens is you have a couple of uh, bad collectors who go in and start seizing money and start seizing all types of items from people and just to make themselves wealthy and without any good cause because you didn't need it for writs of assistance. Anyway, so basically these are all things that are legalized from the Townsend Act. Okay, now we move on to Sam Adams. Okay, most of you are probably familiar with Sam Adams from the beer. Okay, uh, anyway, he was in charge of the brewery and he bankrupted it within a few years. So the Samuel Adams beer that's being produced today has nothing to do with Sam Adams other than they put a guy that kind of looks like Sam Adams, but it's not actually Sam Adams because his family would sue or require that they paid. And the Adams family is still around. John Adams, like the seventh, uh, I saw him on TV about 20 years ago. He was trying out for American Idol. He did not win. He was beat out by one of my former students, a little girl from Burleson, who you may or may not have heard of. Uh, I don't know. If you ask me in class tomorrow, maybe I'll tell you. That way I can tell if you're paying attention. Well, anyway, yeah, I taught her for a year while I was in Burleson, and she was a female, and she won, and I think she still has her own talk show too. I don't know. She's on TV and all the time. She never mentions me. Kind of hurts my feelings. Anyway, Sam Adams will create the Sons of Liberty, and these are people that will go and attack people on the streets. If you support the British government in any way in collecting taxes or paying taxes, they will take you and tar and feather you. Okay? Now, uh, I don't want to draw attention over here to the side to where it has a YouTube link, which I'm not going to show you. Okay? Don't look at that where you can see someone get tarred and feathered on the HBO series John Adams. Please don't watch it because some of the scenes are pretty violent. Okay? Do not watch that. Okay? I'm hoping that you can't read that link on the side, and I'm hoping I'm not giving you the time, although you could pause it. Anyway, so yes, I'm not going to show you. Okay, so the Boston Massacre, also pronounced Massacre. March 5th, 1770. 60 colonists surrounded 10 soldiers. Okay? Uh, there were 8 people wounded and 5 dead. Okay? Eventually, Britain's going to repeal all the Townsend Acts. Now, this in itself, when you hear the word massacre, you need like 60 people for it to truly be a massacre. Or, maybe over 25. 5, that's like a bad car accident. It needs to be beyond a car accident. Okay? And it really makes the colonists look innocent the way that you probably heard the story throughout your lifetime. But let's see if we can go ahead and take a look at what really happened. Okay? So, there were 10 soldiers that were in the streets of Boston. They had heard about and seen people get tarred and feathered. So it wasn't something that didn't happen where they hadn't seen someone carried into the streets, stripped down naked, and have tar so hot poured on you that it sticks to you and it will tear off your skin, giving you permanent scars for the rest of your life. The tar, remember, is about 190 degrees, so that gives you third-degree burns. And the only way you can really take it off is with kerosene or by ripping off the skin underneath it once it hardens. So having seen that, they're already really cautious going through the streets. And a mob of 60 people surrounds them. Okay? A screaming mob. Now, you've probably seen this scene before, but and by the way, I'm not trying to say that everything's okay, but try and put yourself in their shoes. They're about 18, 19, 20 years old, all the soldiers. Okay? 60 people surround them, and they're screaming at them, lobster back. Lobster back! Okay? So they're screaming lobster back at them. The soldiers are a little bit scared because, again, they've seen what's happened to other people that defy them. Then they start throwing snow at them. Okay? Uh, then they start throwing ice at them. Ice can kill you. Okay? So they're starting to hit them with all of this. And some of the people in the crowd are screaming, fire, fire, fire. Not because something was on fire, but they're trying to trick the soldiers into firing because that would make them look bad. Okay? And remember, this is a time where you can't capture this on video and, post it on YouTube or on TikTok or on Twitter or on uh, Ostrich Space or on Facebook or on Wingding or on Blabbersclob, okay, or whatever other things that you might be using. It was all word of mouth that got this spread around. Okay, so the soldiers there are being pelted with ice. People are screaming around them. Someone's yelling fire. They thought that it was a commanding officer that said that. They shoot into the crowd and they hit 13 people. 8 people wounded, 5 people dead. Now, one of the first people killed was Crispus Attucks, who was a runaway slave. He was one of the leaders of the mob, and he died in the fighting. Okay, but the whole way they tell the story makes everyone there look like they're innocent. So this is going to be this is kind of a turning point in the way that they're rebelling, because before this they're just kind of being a nuisance. Now violence has come out on both sides. It makes everyone look bad, but then again, all the colonists look like they're innocent victims. This leads us to the end of class today. I hope everyone's having a great day. It's such a lovely day. Please take the time to prance about and enjoy our good fall weather. With love from Mr. Dugdale.
I'll see y'all day after tomorrow. Good day.